Hello, people of YouTube, people of internet, and people of world. It is me, the Classic Juan, coming to you once again from inside of my mobile studio with my boy, Mega Man. So today I wanted to talk about something that I am constantly thinking about, just a bit of information that I think everybody should know, and something that I just like to discuss pretty frequently because I think it's kind of the crux of a lot of the things that happen in this world currently at this point in time across multiple entertainment platforms, and that's generations. And I'm not talking about generations of consoles. I'm talking about people generations. Generation X, Generation Y, Generation Z, baby boomers, all that kind of crazy fun stuff. And so I'm sure some of you guys are thinking to yourself, what in the world does that have to do with video games? Well, it actually has a whole lot to do with video games. And the better you understand those generations, the better you can understand the way the gaming industry and the entertainment industry is focusing its attention on specific generations. And to be honest, a lot of that attention right now is really heavily being paid attention to the end of the Generation Xers, the beginning of the Generation Yers. And I hate referring to Generation Y as millennials because millennials is a very specific group that came shortly after the 80s. And that's what I want to talk about specifically right now. And so to begin this whole discussion, we'll have to go back to when video games really started coming around. And so computers were a big deal before. They were not home-based like we have them now. They were very much corporate. And if you had a computer at home, you were making money. And so in the 80s, a lot of that started to change with Atari coming out. Home computers started becoming a thing. And Nintendo came on the scene and all that kind of good stuff. And the people that developed those technologies, and my dad likes to remind me a lot, is the baby boomers, my dad's generation. Those guys created the gaming industry. They made it happen. The reason that we have all this is because of those guys. And so you have to give that credit where that credit is due. Those guys started this. Now we have just built upon it. And so I am ever grateful to that generation for doing what they did to allow us to have what we have and to allow us to expand on those things. Now that we got cell phones and color TV and 4Ks and consoles that'll go anywhere, all that kind of great stuff. I thank those guys. Clever minds. We need to get back to that place. Clever minds, guys. Clever minds. And so fast forward a little bit. Generation X happened, and Generation X is kind of a unique generation in that they were already semi-adulting by the time a lot of the technology started to happen. So a lot of the things that they were going to do was set analog style, and sure, they were early enough to transition, and so a lot of them that are ahead of us understand computers, but they're not. They just don't. They're like, why do we need to change things all the time? And I think that's kind of where you start to see a lot of the separation happen. In that the Generation Xers, those guys really don't understand why. And I don't want to generalize, but I'm going to for the vast majority of this video. But a lot of them don't understand why we need to have these constant changes. Why do I need to go from Windows 8 to Windows 10 or from Windows XP to Windows, whatever? They don't. That's too much for them. A lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them. And so that kind of mentality shifted when Generation Y came out. And I hate Generation Y because Generation Y is default called millennials, and there's really a small group right at the end of Generation X, right at the beginning of Generation Y. That's basically the early to late 80s. Like everybody who was born in the 80s is in a different generation than the Xers and the Yers. And I really want to call that generation, you know, I've heard multiple terms being thrown out, you know, the transition generation, the Oregon Trail generation. But I think really that the best moniker for that generation would be the nostalgic generation. And I'm going to go into that here in a minute. But the nostalgic generation, which is everybody born in the 80s essentially, got this great transition. We were all young enough to appreciate living life analog. And so when digital came around, electronics came around, Nintendo, Atari, we got to grow with that. We got to live the transition. So for us, it's not a why is there not something new coming out, or sorry, why is it, we're not the ones saying why is there something new coming out, I just got used to this thing. We're the ones saying when is the new thing coming out, because this thing is getting old. And so that is a lot of the ideology behind that specific group, the nostalgia group. You're constantly, I wanted something greater, I want something bigger, I'm getting accustomed to this, I've mastered this, I want another challenge, I want something more difficult, I want something to take me to the next level. And so there's constantly the urge for increased difficulty, increased, you know, need to change and adjust and modify and relearn and all that kind of great skill to have. And so that's kind of one of the reasons that I dislike the Generation Y group when you're talking about these 80s kids, because of that. Because that ideology of hard work, perseverance, determination, that gets lost in the millennial group. The millennials are not like that. When you get them into a workplace, I feel like they have a lot of entitlement and they're not really persevering as much as they should be, or they're not working as hard as they should be. And a lot of that was lost kind of shortly after the 80s kids were born. But getting back to the nostalgic generation, I think that, and the reason that I want to call it the nostalgic generation is because we are super nostalgic. That's like our whole thing. I mean, there is the Game Fest here in Austin called the Classic Game Fest. This is in its 10th year this year, 2017. And it's a game fest, 2 days, just talking about classic games. We're talking about Atari, we're talking about Famicom, we're talking about NES, we're talking about Sega, Super Nintendo. Heck, the Nintendo 64 is on that list now. So that's all they talk about. There's movies coming out. Beauty and the Beast just came out. Ghost in the Shell. All of these movies are targeted at you if you fall into the nostalgic generation. And why is that? Because you're an adult now and you have money. And people know that we are super nostalgic. They just also released recently, I guess this past holiday season, the redone Nintendo with 30 games that were preset in there. And that thing flew off the shelves. Why? There's nothing special about it. It's preloaded with 30 games from Nintendo that had been released over 20 years ago. Maybe even, 20, 25 years ago. And people bought these things up. And they're paying $200, $300 over the holiday season for them. Why? Because we're super nostalgic. And we love all things nostalgia. And so the market is honing in on that. And we are giving them the money. And why shouldn't we? The fact that we grew up in this generation where we could be nostalgic because of the way that we grew is not a bad thing. If you take into account the fact that every console is like a portion of your life. It's like the soundtrack of your life. You can think of songs that fit into a portion of your life. Oh man, I remember when this album came out, I was really into this, that, or the other, or this part of my life I associated with these things. Okay, that for me, and most of the people in my generation, that association is with a console, some sort of video game console. And it doesn't have to be in and around the time it came out, because by the time I got the Nintendo, the NES, I was probably about 8 years old, so the thing was probably about 8 or 9 years old. So we wasn't up at the time, but that time that I lived when I got my NES, I remember that, and I'm super nostalgic about that. And I still have my NES sitting right under my Xbox One. So yeah, I'm super nostalgic. All my games are there on display, so that when you come over to my house, you too can be nostalgic with me. And I will play NES with you. Come to my house. Let's play NES. I got it. It's hooked up to the TV. It doesn't look right because my TV's a 4K, but still, it's there. So that's the kind of stuff that has separated our generation pretty substantially from the others, because once you get beyond that and you really get into Generation Y, which is the millennial group, that nostalgia disappears. You see kids, and I want to call them kids even though they might be 20-something years old, but you hear a lot of them saying, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, that was a cool thing. No, man, you don't understand. That wasn't a cool thing. That was like the thing. And so that it changes. It changes. So right now, for corporate profit, for the entertainment industry, for the gaming industry, we are the target. And so you're going to see, if you haven't already noticed, a significant amount of nostalgic stuff coming through. I mean, even stuff as simple as Batman, Wonder Woman. I mean, the Justice League movie's coming out soon. And I don't want to say that's nostalgic as much as it is just awesome. But part of that is targeted at you guys, the nostalgic generation. So it's happening. It's going down. So that was just a quick synopsis. I mean, I could talk about this stuff for hours, but I just wanted to give you guys the highlights of the nostalgic generation and what's going on, and why I think right now we're the focus of attention. It's because we're easy targets, guys. We're easy targets. And I don't care what you say or what you do or how terrible you feel about me calling you an easy target. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're probably going to see stuff. I don't know if you noticed this, but if you were really into anime back in the day, and most of you probably were, there was a Dragon Ball Z movie that came out at one point that was effing terrible. But people watched it because nostalgia, guys. Nostalgia. So just remember that your nostalgia is what makes you unique in the generation, the nostalgia generation. We have that. It's unique to us. Beauty and the Beast, Ghost in the Shell, Dragon Ball Z, everything. They're doing it, man. They're doing it. Rare Replay just also came out on Xbox One. All old games. I mean, they're doing it to you, man. They're targeting it. Pay attention. So I wanted to put that out there. I just wanted to give a brief synopsis of our generation, because right now, like I said, we're being targeted. And I just want you to see it. I want you to be aware that it's happening. And it's okay. It's okay, because if they keep remaking stuff from my childhood, I'm going to keep buying it. I'm going to keep playing it. I'm going to keep watching it. So this is the Classic Juan saying later, bye.